To x-ray the issues from the Anambra governorship election, let's now bring in Said Hussaini. He's the Director of Research at the Center for Democracy and Development. Said, thank you so much for being here. And you've actually been on your feet since morning, really just getting all the feedbacks from your observers all across Anambra State. So give us some of the information that you can share right now, especially when you compare this particular election to the previous ones in Anambra State.
Well, I should first of all echo some of the very positive feedback that we've received from your correspondent from the field. From our perspective, there were some quite cheering aspects of what we've witnessed. For one, the fact that voters still showed up, that the elections were still held, despite that wider climate of insecurity and uncertainty that we observed before the election, is certainly worth celebrating. As well, the fact that the police, primarily, and other security agencies, by and large, appeared to conduct themselves in a professional manner, adhering to standard codes of conduct in their engagement with citizens, was also something that we were quite elated to witness. But as you've also now reported, we observed across a number of polling units the malfunctioning of the BVAS, INEC's bimodal voter accreditation system, and of course that's now required that the election continue, where in polling units across the state where we've still not gotten results. So that part of the process, that part of the result as far as we have it today, is certainly something that's a cause for concern and requires that INEC step up its game, frankly. Of course, it's a new technology, and so these teething pains or teething troubles, let's say, would emerge. But nonetheless, this is a major election with important stakes for the people of Anambra who have braved a difficult security situation to come out and vote. So they expected a little more from the commission.
Yeah, but from the situation room and what you got from, the field, it's a great improvement, just like my colleague asked, away from previous elections in Anambra State and the rest. But how about this allegation of inducement of voters? We didn't see that. None of our correspondents saw that.
Well, in terms of assessing whether or not it's great relative to previous elections, I think we still have to see what the results would be. So I would say it's probably still early to draw a firm conclusion about how this compares to previous elections. And if we wanted to do so, it would be important to identify particular variables that we wanted to compare on. So one important variable that we've been paying attention to would be the level of turnout, right? Because this is one area where there has been concern previously in Anambra elections, and there was concern leading up to this poll. And though anecdotal findings from our observation and from what we've heard from other media agencies suggest that there was some measure of turnout, people were actually present at the polls, we still need to look at the figures to let them guide our assessment as to whether or not this surpasses or looks, as it's previously done, which has not been adequate. To the question about vote buying, I think, or this sort of inducement of voters, unfortunately, we did encounter some examples of that. Our observers were deployed across the local governments, so that gave us some measure of a spread. So we were able to cover a lot more ground. And in the variety of local governments where our observers were present, some did turn up examples of party agents looking over the voting materials in order to see what voters were casting, and then some allegations that they then rewarded voters on the basis of them
That was
complying.
before they come to cast their votes.
So
there is no pictorial, there's no pictorial evidence to this, because it is really germane. If you're making, allegations, so that you bring the evidence.
No, in some cases during, unfortunately, in some cases even during voting. So what hasn't been determined yet is the extent to which, how widespread that was.
And how much of an impact it will have really on
absolutely.
the polls. Well, Said, while we're still having this conversation, because the technology being used here, the bimodal, is quite new, really, although it had been used in the Isoko by-elections, like we had said earlier on, even though Isoko is a smaller community compared to Anambra State. But really, don't you think that INEC should have learned some lessons really from, the experience in Delta State going into these elections? Because that technology, is something that a lot of Nigerians are looking forward to in terms of our elections.
Absolutely. And there was the expectation that having at least had that little bit of experience, that we would see some measure of professionalism in the way that technology was deployed. But of course, every election is different, and this one...
I hope the legislators won't be vindicated with this now.
This is a concern. But of course, every election is different, and the fact that this one came with very peculiar challenges which had a direct impact on INEC in the lead up to the election, including the attacks on their office, means that perhaps we should consider them a little generously when we try to account for the way exactly really. the way in which this has.
But the potential impact of these technological disruptions really is what I'm really concerned about.
Could there be an alternative? A plan B?
That we'll have to see. In the hours coming. So INEC has said that in some areas where voting was not able to be conducted today, there will be an attempt to conduct voting tomorrow. So that gives them some time to maybe try to make some adjustments. They also said that in contexts where the machine failed or where it was not operated properly by the ad hoc staff, there were backup machines provided. So we still need to assess the extent to which those backup machines actually helped resolve the problems when they arose. So tomorrow will give us an opportunity to see how much improvement might have been gained in the interim.
And this has led to fears really that INEC might not be ready for electronic voting and even transmission at the end of the day. So how can INEC really improve on this going forward? This is just one state compared to when we have a general election.
It's a good question, but at the same time, I think INEC is learning on the job. They have to be, frankly, because there's really no other alternative. And the fact is that this election itself provides lessons that can be learned. And there will be a number of other midterm elections where these technologies can be tested before the general election arises.
So should Nigerians really be optimistic that we're getting there? Talking about electronic voting, transmission of results?
I think we can moderately be optimistic because the Commission is certainly invested and they certainly believe in the capacity of these technologies to produce better results. But we would need to see them actually exercise these beliefs and put them into practice in the interim between now and the 2023 election.
And of course, the bimodal machines, these are quite new, really, compared to the machines that we've used in prior elections. But a lot of Nigerians probably are listening to us and saying, bimodal, what is that exactly? So you are the expert right now, at least to a certain extent. Can you educate us? What is the difference between this machine and what we had previously in other elections?
Sure. What we've been told and what we've witnessed through our observers is that the bimodal voter accreditation system has two modes, right? That as is implied in the name. The first is that it does take your fingerprint, as did the previous
other machine.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Exactly. But in addition to that, it also takes your facial scan. So it uses the two methods to verify your identity. And the utility of that is that if one of the methods fails, then the other one can serve as a backup. So in fact, it's supposed to be more fail-proof than the previous one. So the fact that we've seen it, actually not succeed in several occasions today.
Well, the smart card machines had the,
they had their own glitches as well.
They certainly did.
In 2015.
Yeah.
They certainly did. So this is to be expected to some degree when it's the first time that the technology is attempted. So that, well, at a substantial rate, as was the case in 2015. So there's still an opportunity for INEC to meet up, I believe.
And maybe introduced other electoral forms of voting, system of voting.
It will likely happen.
Like the postal voting system in America and other climes and in the UK, right? Okay, thanks so very much. Said Hussaini is of the Center for Democracy and Development.
Thank you for having me.